Arirang News, I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. President Moon Jae-in's special envoys meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang. The regime says Kim reached a satisfactory agreement with the South Korean officials. Police open an investigation into ruling party Governor An Hee-jung after he is accused of multiple counts of rape by his secretary. He has already offered to resign, and the party are taking steps to boot him out. Plus, the head of the World Trade Organization warns US President Donald Trump that his unprecedented tariff plans will cause a deep global recession. Our top story this morning, the South Korean president's special envoys in North Korea for a historic two-day visit got in touch with the Blue House early this morning to update the South on their dinner meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un last night. Our chief Blue House correspondent, Moon Gon-young, is live on the phone for us to give us more details. So, Kon-young, what have we learned so far?
Well, Mark, contrary to the high-level North Korean delegation's visit to the South early last month, South Korean media were not given access to travel with the senior-level South Korean special envoys to the North, so we've had to really just rely on the Blue House to bring us up to speed on the latest happening in Pyongyang. So what we've learned this morning is that South Korean President Special Envoys led by National Security Council Chief Chung Eui-yong and represented by a National Intelligence Chief Seo Hun were treated to dinner hosted by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the headquarters of the North ruling Workers' Party. The very first meeting/dinner between North Korea's Kim and the South Koreans lasted more than 4 hours, and it's widely believed that the special envoys were able to deliver President Moon's letter to the North Korean leader during this time. Of course, we don't know yet what that entails, but Blue House spokesperson Kim Jong-un noted that it marked the first time for the Kim regime to invite special envoys from the South to the headquarters of its powerful ruling party, so the location is worth noting, they said. The two sides reportedly agreed on certain conditions, which the Blue House declined to reveal at this point, saying the National Security Director-led delegation will brief the press when they return home later this evening. But senior Blue House officials have assessed the outcome of last night's historic talks not disappointing. Mark.
So any word yet from the North Korean side? How are they assessing last night's meeting?
Well, North Korean state media reported in a dispatch that its leader held an open-hearted talks with South Korean President Moon Jae-in's envoys Monday evening, adding that the North Korean leader expressed his desire to, quote, write a new history of national reunification during this dinner last night. We don't know yet what that means. But the state media also said its leader exchanged views with the South special envoys when they relayed President Moon's intentions for an inter-Korean summit and made a satisfactory agreement. Of course, we don't know yet what the satisfactory agreement is, and we'll have to wait until the South envoys return. But North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, if you remember, has sent an invitation for the South Korean leader to visit Pyongyang for a summit through his sister, who traveled to South Korea last month as his special envoy, part of the Olympic delegation. So we will have to wait until the 10-member South Korean delegation flies back to the South later this evening to find out the details of the trip, the first known high-level visit by South Korean officials to the North in about a decade. Mark?
Well, thank you very much for that report, Kon-young. That was our Moon Gon-young reporting from the Blue House on that historic trip to the North by a group of South Korean envoys. Now, we're going to stay with that story because the United States says it's cautiously optimistic about the visit to North Korea by those senior South Korean envoys. Pentagon spokesman Colonel Robert Manning told reporters on Monday that the Trump administration encourages talks between the two Koreas. China has also welcomed the trip. Beijing's foreign ministry said the Chinese government is looking forward to the meeting having a positive outcome and eventually laying the groundwork for talks between Washington and Pyongyang. The United States has slapped new sanctions on North Korea over its use of chemical weapons against its own nationals. While it did not elaborate, it seems to be in reference to last year's assassination of Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
The United States has imposed new sanctions on North Korea over its alleged use of chemical weapons, following its determination that such weapons were used to kill Kim Jong-un last year. The State Department published in the Federal Register that Pyongyang has used chemical weapons in violation of international law against its own nationals. It did not elaborate, but diplomatic experts explained this is an apparent reference to the killing of Kim at an international airport in Malaysia using VX nerve agent. The sanctions include a termination of aid to North Korea as well as a ban on arms sales and financial assistance to the regime. While the new measures are unlikely to have a major impact on the North, which is already under heavy international sanctions for its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs, they are interpreted as the Trump administration's continued strong pressure on the regime. The sanctions devised under the Chemical and Biological Weapons Control and Warfare Elimination Act of 1991 will remain in effect until further notice. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
Now, amid fears mounting over a potential trade war, South Korea's top economic policymaker says Seoul will convey its concerns on the current trade frictions to the United States and other nations at a meeting of G20 nations that's going to happen later this month. Our Kim Hae-sung with the details.
The Korean government held an emergency meeting Monday to address the rise of protectionist measures coming out of Washington, including last week's announcement to take steps to impose a 25% tariff on steel imports.
We are very aware of the recent developments in the overseas trade environment. We will closely examine the possibility of growing conflict in global trade, its impact on Korea's exports and the global economy, and address external risks swiftly.
Korea is the #3 steel exporter to the U.S., and trade friction with Washington amid ongoing bilateral trade renegotiations poses a downside risk. The IMF and the World Trade Organization have raised concerns about Trump's tariffs proposal on steel and aluminum, and major U.S. trading partners like Canada, the EU, and China have already responded, saying they will consider retaliatory actions, raising fears of a possible trade war. At the meeting involving ministers of foreign affairs, trade, energy and industry and others, Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon emphasized the need for government agencies to work together and said Korea will talk to U.S. officials and business groups.
At the G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bankers in March, we will convey our concerns about the trade frictions with the U.S. and other countries through bilateral meetings.
Kim added the government will work closely with local businesses and focus on a strategy of diversifying the nation's exports and investment, including strengthening trade ties with Southeast Asian countries. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, staying with the latest fallout from President Trump's steel and aluminium tariff announcement, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is pressing Trump to change his mind as the EU, Asian countries and other economic powerhouses mull their own ways to strike back. Despite the pressure from home and abroad, President Trump appears to be sticking to his guns. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With fears rising over the possibility of a full-scale tariff war, the head of the World Trade Organization is urging U.S. President Donald Trump to reverse course over his decision to slap hefty tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Speaking at a WTO meeting in Geneva on Monday, Roberto Azevedo said Trump's proposal would trigger a domino effect that could lead to a global recession, adding there's a much higher and a real risk of triggering an escalation of trade barriers around the world. Despite the grim warnings, President Trump has rejected the idea that his measures, which he says are a way of defending U.S. national security, would lead to a trade war, even though his announcement prompted threats of retaliation from around the world. They include the EU, which is threatening to impose equally heavy import taxes on American goods. According to the EU Commissioner for Trade, Brussels could apply a 25% tariff on around $3.5 billion of imports from the U.S., targeting iconic U.S. exports, including Levi's jeans, Harley-Davidson motorbikes, and bourbon whiskey. Brazil, Mexico, and Japan have also said they will consider retaliatory steps if President Trump presses ahead with his plans. Concerns are growing as the world waits to see if and when the first domino falls and what effect it could have. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
China's National People's Congress opened its annual parliamentary sessions on Monday. It is pledged to boost defence spending this year while keeping its economic growth target at 6.5%. And the legislators cheered the unlimited rule for President Xi Jinping. Kwon Jang-oh reports.
The second of the two sessions, or Lianghui gathering, opened on Monday. Premier Li Keqiang began by announcing the government's economic growth target for the upcoming year. Beijing had decided to maintain its growth target at around 6.5% for a second year running. That comes despite the country's economy exceeding expectations last year, hitting 6.9% growth. The conservative target is seen as a signal that the government is trying to rein in the nation's spending, reduce debt and improve overall financial stability.
We must remain committed to the general principle of pursuing progress while ensuring stability and to the new development philosophy. We must guide and stabilize expectations, improve living standards, and promote sustained health economy and social development.
However, economic issues at this year's gathering have been overshadowed by political ones. Last month, Beijing announced that it would be scrapping its two-term presidential limit, clearing the way for President Xi Jinping to stay in office beyond the end of his second term in 2023. That decision is expected to be ratified during the course of the two sessions over the next fortnight. The president's political philosophy, known simply as Xi Jinping thought, is also expected to be integrated into China's constitution. These moves essentially elevate Xi to the same level as China's first communist leader, Mao Zedong, and although it has caused alarm in some circles, the two sessions is largely seen as a rubber-stamping ceremony with little objection raised by the 5,000 or so delegates attending.
If a good leader comes to power, we should let him remain in that leadership position forever. In this way, there is continuity. It's great.
This is the choice of history. This is the choice of the Chinese people. It's what the Chinese revolutionary cause needs. I really support it.
The ending of term limits and other proposed policies will be put to the vote on Sunday. Kwon Jang-oh, Arirang News.
Consumer prices in South Korea increased in the 1% range for the fifth straight month in February. Statistics Korea says its consumer price index jumped 1.4% in February compared to the same month last year, accelerating from the previous month's 1% on-year gain. The core inflation rate, which excludes volatile food and oil prices, rose 1.2% on year. Prices of food, drinks and lodging increased while communication prices dropped. In particular, prices of agricultural and fisheries spiked by a whopping 3.5% on year. A wave of sexual misconduct allegations brought to the surface by the Me Too movement has spread to Korea's political sphere, with a well-known political heavyweight hit with extremely serious allegations. An Hee-jung, who is the governor of Chungcheongnam-do province, has been accused by his secretary of multiple cases of sexual assault and rape. Appearing on local news media on Monday, the victim said she was raped on 4 occasions between June 2017 and February this year. She even said that An raped her after mentioning the Me Too movement. Shortly after the broadcast, the ruling Democratic Party said it had expelled the governor following an emergency meeting of party leaders. And after initially insisting the sexual relations were consensual, later offered to resign and said he would stop all political activities. The police have officially begun a criminal probe into the case as well. He had been considered one of the main contenders for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination against the then frontrunner and now the current president, Moon Jae-in. Former Defence Minister Kim Jong-un is set to reappear for questioning on Tuesday over allegations he abused his power in relation to the former government's illegal political cyber activities between 2013 and 2014. Prosecutors believe they have secured new evidence that shows Kim issued direct orders regarding an internal probe into the military cyber command's suspected political meddling. Kim was first summoned for questioning 3 months ago, but was later released after spending 11 days in detention. He's also suspected of fabricating data related to the 2014 Seoul ferry sinking when he was serving as the head of the National Security Council. On June 13th, Koreans will head to the polls for local elections. And better late than never, rival party lawmakers managed to pass a redistricting bill on Monday, the 100-day countdown to polling day. Given this is the first election to be held since President Moon took power last year, watchers say the June election will be a barometer of the administration's popularity. Now, Kim Min-ji with the details.
The National Assembly on Monday passed a long-overdue redistricting bill for the June 13th local elections. By law, the electoral map has to be finalized 6 months prior to the election, meaning December 13th last year, but political wrangling kept lawmakers from having the bill ready on time. The new map adds a combined 27 more positions for city and provincial councillors, except for Jeju Special Self-Governing Province and the administrative city of Sejong, for a total of 690 posts. As for council members, there will be 29 more posts for a nationwide total of 2,927. That's more than 3,600 positions up for grabs, not counting the key posts of mayor, governor, and education superintendent in 17 cities and provinces. A mini general election is also in the works, as about 10 parliamentary seats are going to be vacant, with some lawmakers giving up their post to run for local office, plus some who have been stripped of their position. With just 3 months left, the priorities of the rival parties will be to field the best possible candidate in hopes of keeping the posts they have now, or if they're lucky, adding new ones. It's also the first nationwide poll under the Moon Jae-in administration, meaning the results will be a barometer of how the public assesses the young government. Preliminary registration is open for candidates running for mayor, district office chief, education superintendent, and local councillor. Registration for county council members will start in April. Once registered, candidates can start campaigning, open their election offices, and start sending material to voters in their constituencies. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, it's a pivotal trading hub that's located right between the mainland of Southeast Asia and Australia. Indonesia is the region's biggest economy, and there are also plenty of Koreans doing business in that country, not only just to make money, profits, but also to give something back to society there. Cha Sang-mi reports from Jakarta.
Indonesia boasts the largest economy in Southeast Asia and is one of the world's major emerging markets. And it seems that several Korean firms are contributing to Indonesia's economic growth and employing its people. Sure, Koreans are spread out across the world, but Indonesia is one country where they find themselves at home. Some 50,000 Koreans live and work in Indonesia, and some 300 Korean tourists visit every year. A shoe manufacturer on the island of Java currently employs some 40,000 locals. And the head of the company, a Korean, sees his company's business there as a win-win situation.
Indonesia has the biggest population in Southeast Asia at some 260 million. But since they lack the industrial technology to hire so many people, there's also a lack of jobs.
Shin said that Indonesia's young and abundant workforce and relatively low wages are reasons why investors see merits in the market.
I already working here 12 years, and then I feel confident and I feel happy work together with Korean, especially South Korean.
And with Korean pop culture and cuisine making huge inroads in Indonesia, a firm that sells and distributes Korean food products has found a way to offer the country not only highly sought-after goods, but some socially meaningful services.
We have been sponsoring Indonesian children suffering from cardiac diseases for the past 25 years. We're also helping people with leprosy and those displaced by flooding. Corporate social responsibility is our family business.
The owner expressed gratitude to Indonesia for enabling him to expand his business and work with locals who share the same mindset. But most importantly, he seemed to be thrilled to see the locals enjoying Korean food.
Because I really love Korean food, every time I run out of kimchi, I come to this market to get it.
These two companies are just a small part of the Korean business presence on the Indonesian archipelago. More than 2,500 private businesses in a range of sectors from the garment industry to education coexist with the locals, irrespective of language, nationality, or religion. 차상미, Arirang News, Jakarta.
Now let's take a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we're going to start with the general election in Italy. The results have produced no clear outcome as to who will govern the country and has potentially set the stage for weeks of political wrangling as well. For more on this and other international news, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, what can we expect now? This election is all over.
Yes, Mark, the question now is how the government will be formed and which parties will join forces to make that happen. Sunday's election resulted in a hung parliament, but the populist Five Star Movement and Anti-Immigration League Party did manage to muscle out the governing centre-left Democratic Party. That resulted in the governing bloc's leader and former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi to resign as party leader, but he did say the PD would have no part in the new administration, adding that it would sit as the opposition. The leaders of the top two anti-establishment groups, meanwhile, are poised to engage in complex talks to form the next government. Five Star Movement came out as the largest single party with a third of the votes, but the centre-right coalition ended up with the most seats. This has resulted in the leaders of both groups claiming a right to take the helm, sparking fears of a prolonged political instability. Both share the same anti-EU sentiment as well as the same views on certain domestic matters, but neither side appear willing to take the small chair at the table. Whoever ends up governing Italy will be on a collision course also with the EU, especially with France and Germany. The leaders of both countries are pushing for a more immigrant-friendly Europe, but will likely face resistance from the Eurozone's third largest economy. French President Emmanuel Macron has urged his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to ensure that Moscow's ally Syria implements a UN resolution calling for a 30-day ceasefire in eastern Ghouta. In Monday's phone call with Putin, Macron added that the UN truce should be accepted, quote, without any ambiguity. According to the Kremlin, Putin agreed on the importance of providing aid and evacuating civilians. Moscow had proposed a daily 5-hour truce instead of the UN resolution, but both proposals have not been met. The French leader's remark also came after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad vowed to push ahead with his military's assault on the rebel-held area. Dozens more people were killed Monday as a convoy with humanitarian aid entered eastern Ghouta amid continued bombardment by pro-regime forces. Amid a global movement against sexual harassment, France will be slapping on-the-spot fines to those caught catcalling. Interior Minister Gérard Collomb announced on Monday that the measure to impose the €90 fine will be enforced in the coming months. French lawmakers have been calling for legislation against acts that degrades and humiliates women in public. Paris is also slated to announce a sweeping new law targeting sexual harassment in the coming weeks.
Good morning. Thankfully, we'll have a repeat of yesterday's pleasant weather conditions along with big gaps in temperatures across much of the country. Also, it's Gyeongchip today. According to East Asian calendars, it signifies the awakening of hibernating insects and frogs by the warm spring weather. And mostly sunny skies will be joined by a few clouds, and highs will rise rapidly, getting up to 10 degrees Celsius here in the capital, while Daegu and Daejeon will make it to 13 degrees this afternoon. And this week, we'll see temperatures going up and down with a mix of rain and snow in the forecast for Thursday. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While the nation will have big gaps in temperatures under sunny skies with mild afternoon highs, North Korea will be under mostly sunny skies along with cooler highs than the south. And as for the rest of Asia, Beijing had freezing morning temperatures, but afternoon highs will rise rapidly, but it's going to be cooler than Seoul. Meanwhile, autumn is upon Australia. That said, Perth could have a hotter day on Tuesday than it has had all summer. And heading to North America, a winter weather advisory was issued for most of the Chicago area Monday as snow moved into the region once again. And the mix of rain and snow is in the forecast for the area for Tuesday as well. And as for South America, Rio de Janeiro will get a break from ongoing rainfall on Tuesday into Thursday. And taking you to Europe, deep freeze conditions will continue to grip Moscow and expect to wake up to lows nearing minus 15 degrees Celsius on Tuesday. And lastly, to Africa, Algiers and Cape Town will see strong winds during the day. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave the news for now as well. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time, so until then, goodbye.